It started with a smile. Not the warm kind. Not the kind you give to an old friend or a loyal client. No, this smile was flat. Precise. The kind that comes with a clipboard and pre-approved talking points. Your profit margins are too low, Michael Trent said, tapping his tablet like he was swiping away a smudge. We're starting with compensation adjustments. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Starting with you, Dr. Bennett, he continued. Your salary will drop 40%, effective immediately. Then came the kicker, delivered with all the charm of an automated voicemail. Nothing personal. It's just business. 14 years. 14 years of Sundays spent bottle-feeding kittens and Christmas mornings answering emergency calls. 14 years of handwritten sympathy cards, all-night vigils beside recovering patients, and quietly slipping off my gloves to hold a grieving owner's hand. And now, I was overhead, a line item, a liability. Michael finally looked up. His eyes were steady, professional, vacant. Our analysts identified inefficiencies tied to prolonged consultations and non-billable emotional support. We're encouraging shorter appointments and upselling care bundles where appropriate. Where appropriate. I forced my voice to stay calm. When does this take effect? Next pay cycle, he replied, already swiping to another window. Your updated schedule and new training modules are in your inbox. I gripped the arms of my chair until my knuckles went white. I wasn't just being cut back. I was being erased methodically, politely, like a smudge on a balance sheet. As I stood to leave, Michael offered that smile again, thin as ice. And, Dr. Bennett, please remember, we're part of something bigger now. Change is uncomfortable, but necessary. I didn't answer, because the only thing I felt at that moment was betrayal. Not loud, just deep, quiet, piercing. Outside his office, the clinic looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. The walls still held the crayon drawings from neighborhood kids, smiling dogs in superhero capes, cats with sparkly crowns, but they suddenly looked out of place, like artifacts from a world that no longer existed. At reception, Sophie sat frozen behind her screen. Her eyes were glassy, fingers stiff on the keyboard. You too? I asked quietly. She nodded. 30%. And they cut my hours. Said they'll stabilize later. In the waiting room, a child laughed as a rabbit nibbled a cracker. A woman gently rocked a cat carrier. No one in that room knew what was happening behind the glass. Not yet. I turned to head to the break room and stopped cold. Biscuit's photo was gone. For nearly a decade, that picture had hung by the staff fridge. Biscuit, our three-legged clinic dog, had greeted every visitor, every pet, with stubborn affection and a wag like a windshield wiper. When he passed, we'd kept his photo up. Not out of nostalgia. Out of loyalty. In its place now hung a corporate poster. New era. New efficiency. Bright solutions for modern pet care. That, more than the pay cut, is what shattered me. Because that photo wasn't just a memory. It was a promise. And someone had torn it down like it meant nothing. I returned to my office and shut the door. My hand drifted toward the only thing that still felt real, a thank you card taped above my desk. The handwriting shook across the page. You gave Rusty 6 more months. You gave us time. We'll never forget that. Neither would I. I reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out an old, folded slip of paper, my veterinary oath. I hadn't looked at it in years, but I could still recite every word. I will remember that there is art to medicine as well as science, and that warmth, sympathy, and understanding may outweigh the surgeon's knife or the chemist's drug. This wasn't about money. This was about what they were trying to bury. And something deep in me, something older than Oakwood, older than paychecks and performance reviews, stood up. They could take my title, but they were never going to take my care. The next morning, Oakwood didn't feel like home. The sun filtered through the reception windows like it always had, but instead of warmth, it cast harsh light on everything that felt wrong. A chipped coffee mug sat abandoned on the counter, and where Biscuit's photo used to be, a laminated sheet now read, "Optimize workflow. Increase revenue per visit." The air smelled sterile, like a hospital pretending to care. I sorted prescriptions in the back room, my hands moving on autopilot while my mind spun. Michael's words replayed like static in my head. Inefficiencies, alignment, standardization. What about compassion? What about people? Ethan, our youngest vet, leaned against the cabinet beside me. He looked older than 32, like corporate medicine had already hollowed something out of him. You read the new care protocols? He asked quietly. I nodded. They had arrived last night like a Trojan horse, wrapped in branding, full of decay. Shorter appointment windows. Add-on services disguised as gold standard care. Suggested scripts to help clients understand the value of upgraded wellness packages. Ethan's voice dropped even lower. They pulled this at my last clinic in Nashville. First, it's recommend strongly. Then it's required quota. You miss targets, you get flagged. You push back too hard, he trailed off. What happens? They label you emotionally compromised. And then you're gone. I felt something inside me recoil, not in surprise, but recognition. It wasn't new. It was a pattern. Just before noon, Sophie slipped me a folded memo, no words, just her eyes saying everything. Price adjustments, effective immediately. Vaccines had jumped from $45 to $65. Basic dental cleanings now ranged up to $425. The new comprehensive care bundles were bloated with redundant tests and unnecessary screenings, especially for pets with stable histories. This wasn't medicine. It was marketing. Predatory. Cloaked in concern. You okay? Sophie asked gently. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know who we're becoming. That afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker arrived, 82 years old, always in her lavender coat, carrying Chairman Meow in a fleece blanket like a newborn. That cat had survived 2 strokes and 3 winters with her. He was her companion, her anchor. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too many goodbyes. I got your clinic's letter, she said quietly. It said Chairman needs a senior panel again. We did that 2 months ago, didn't we? I nodded, biting back the words I wanted to scream. In my medical opinion, I said carefully, he's stable. We can wait until spring. Her shoulders relaxed. Oh, thank God. I wasn't sure if I could afford it this month. His heating pad already raised my electric bill, but I couldn't let him get cold. I swallowed hard, shame and fury pooling in my chest. She wasn't declining care. She was rationing love. Just as I was finishing the exam, the door creaked open behind me. Michael. His tone was syrupy sweet, the kind you use on someone you think you can sell to. Mrs. Whitaker. I'm Michael, Regional Operations. I heard Chairman was due for a senior panel today. Have we scheduled that yet? Her eyes flicked nervously to me, then back to him. Well, Dr. Bennett said. Oh, of course, he said, smiling tightly. But you know, cats at Chairman's age can mask illness. A proactive test might catch something early. Then came the final blow, a special one-time discount. Still over $400. Still unjustified. I watched her nod, hesitantly pulling her checkbook from her purse. Her fingers trembled. It wasn't consent. It was fear. And I couldn't stay silent. We just ran those labs, I said, stepping forward. There's no clinical reason to repeat them today. Michael's eyes narrowed. We're simply recommending consistency in patient care. And I'm recommending ethics, I said flatly. The air froze. Mrs. Whitaker looked between us, confused and ashamed, as if she had done something wrong by trusting someone. After she left, Michael cornered me in the hallway, his smile gone. When we set protocols, we expect them to be followed. And when did you become a veterinarian? I shot back, my voice low but shaking. You don't know these pets. You don't know these people. You only know numbers. He leaned in, voice cold. 2 weeks, Rachel. I suggest you spend them wisely. I watched him walk away, his clipboard swinging like a judge's gavel. That clipboard held metrics. Mine held memories. And I knew then, clear as a winter sky. They weren't just replacing me. They were trying to rewrite what care meant. But not if I had anything to say about it. I walked out of the exam room with Mrs. Whitaker, but I wasn't really there anymore. Her voice trailed behind me, soft and grateful, but my feet moved on their own, carrying me past the reception desk, past the family with the golden retriever, past the wall that used to hold Biscuit's photo and now glared sterile in its emptiness. I made it to my office and shut the door before the grief could spill. Then I collapsed into the chair, my hand shaking. It wasn't anger this time, it was grief. Real, guttural, silent grief. They hadn't fired me, but they cut me out, patient by patient, value by spreadsheet. On the wall in front of me hung a picture of me and Biscuit from Oakwood's early days. He was sitting crooked in my lap, tongue out, eyes defiant. The plaque beneath it read, "Sometimes the heart heals more than the medicine." I'd forgotten we'd even put that there. Now, I couldn't look away. The walls were lined with pieces of my life. Thank you cards from families who'd lost pets, crayon drawings of cats with superhero capes, a letter from a little girl who'd named her hamster after me, Dr. Reiki. Each one a thread in a tapestry I didn't realize I'd been weaving. And they were unraveling it. Quietly, efficiently, without shame. I opened my bottom drawer and pulled out something I hadn't touched in years, a folded piece of parchment from vet school. My oath! The ink had faded, but I knew every word. I will remember that I remain a member of society, with special obligations to all fellow human beings, those sound of mind and body, as well as the infirm. I'd made that promise at 24, under an oak tree, with shaking hands and a fire in my chest. Somewhere along the way, I'd started believing I was too small to make a difference. Michael's voice echoed again. "We expect you to follow the protocol." And Mrs. Whitaker's trembling fingers. The way she looked at me like I was her last safeguard. It wasn't just one test. One lie. One patient. It was every time someone came through our doors hoping for care and was sold fear instead. A soft knock broke the spiral. It was Diana, our lead tech, usually upbeat, now subdued. "Mrs. Peterson's here with Baxter. She asked for you." Baxter. 10 years old now, but still that same stubborn beagle who once chewed through the clinic's rug during his first visit. "I'll be right there," I said, my voice steadier than it should have been. In the exam room, Mrs. Peterson smiled when she saw me. "He still drags me here like it's Disneyland," she laughed, and Baxter wagged so hard his whole back end shook. As I examined him, she told me about her grandkids, her garden, her roses blooming early this year. I nodded, listened, asked about his limp. She told me she trusted no one else with him. Then she said it. "Don't change, Dr. Rachel. Please. This town needs you." That did it. That cracked the wall I'd tried to hold up. I walked her out, said goodbye like it was normal. Then I returned to my office, sat down, and opened my laptop. A folder on my desktop had been sitting there untouched for months. Clinic_startup_ideas docs. Just a dream. Just in case. But that night, I didn't just open it. I rewrote it. I researched leases. Called an old supplier. Emailed a colleague who'd started her own practice in Berea. And finally, I picked up the phone and dialed Dr. Leonard. His voice, familiar and warm, cracked through the static of my mind. "Rachel, how's my old place holding up?" And I broke. For the first time. "I can't stay," I whispered, eyes wet. "They're gutting it. They're gutting everything." He was quiet. Then he said, "Then don't stay. Build something better." The next morning, I opened my eyes with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I knew what I had to do. Resignation wasn't the end. It was the spark. 2 weeks. That's what I gave them. Enough time, I thought, to leave with grace, to tie loose ends. But VetCorps had no interest in grace. By the second morning, Sophie pulled me aside with her screen dimmed. "They're reassigning your clients," she whispered. Look. There it was. A familiar list: Baxter, Methuselah, the Garcia cats, names I'd treated for years, now silently reassigned to other vets with no consent, no notice. "It's like they're erasing you before you've even gone," she murmured. I stared at the list, and something inside me hardened. This wasn't just retaliation. It was strategic and cruel. The air in the clinic grew colder. Conversations became clipped. Schedules were reshuffled under the guise of transition efficiency. Michael started lingering in the halls, clipboard in hand like a warden doing rounds. But even so, cracks were forming in their control. Clients began asking questions. Where's Dr. Rachel? Is she on vacation? Will she be back by Baxter's birthday checkup? I watched Valerie give vague answers, her voice tight. Diana looked away when clients pressed harder. Ethan, ever reserved, finally muttered, "Some changes aren't always for the better," when asked outright. Then came the real escalation. One afternoon, Michael summoned me into the conference room. Waiting there were two suits, one in charcoal gray, the other in corporate navy. Legal and HR. Dr. Bennett, the lawyer began smoothly, sliding a letter across the table. We've become aware that you intend to open a competing practice. As per your employment agreement, this would violate the non-compete clause within a 20-mile radius. I didn't touch the letter. I never signed a non-compete, I said calmly. It was included in your transition paperwork. No, it wasn't. I reached into my bag and placed a carefully organized binder on the table. Here are copies of every document I signed, reviewed with legal counsel. There is no enforceable clause. And even if there were, Kentucky law prioritizes patient access over restrictive competition, especially in medical services. Michael's jaw clenched. The lawyer shifted, suddenly less composed. We're not here to argue technicalities. Then, what are we doing? I asked, eyes locked. Because intimidation doesn't look good on you. A beat of silence. Then the HR rep cleared his throat, voice softening. Dr. Bennett, we're open to negotiation. Perhaps a mutual agreement, temporary boundaries, something to make this transition smoother. 2 hours of back and forth followed. I agreed to a 30-day cooling period, no solicitation, no public announcements. In return, they dropped all attempts to block my location or timeline. A fragile truce. But the damage was done. Back at my desk, a folded note waited. From Sophie. Inside, a list of 40 names. All had called that week, asking one question. Where is she going? At the bottom, her handwriting slanted and fierce. They're not asking about Oakwood. They're asking about you. That night, I met Diana and Ethan at the corner cafe, where cinnamon lived in the air and memories soaked the chipped wood tables. We spoke in whispers, cautious but burning. I sign a lease, I told them. Riverbend Animal Care. 17 days from now. Diana grinned, the first real smile I'd seen in weeks. They cut my hours again. I'm in. Ethan looked up, slow and sure. Tell me when to walk. I've had my bag packed since Monday. We didn't toast. We didn't high-five. We just nodded, quiet warriors preparing for a storm they no longer feared. Lexington didn't need a corporation. It needed a place where care still meant something. The sign wasn't even up yet. But Riverbend Animal Care stood ready, modest, imperfect, and full of soul. It smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh paint, and the floors still bore scuffs from the moving dolly. Diana had patched the drywall herself. Ethan had assembled the treatment tables from scratch. Valerie built the front desk from old pine and stubbornness. Above it, taped with blue painter's tape, hung a single photo. Me, Dr. Leonard, and Biscuit, his tongue out, one paw missing, his eyes full of mischief. Sophie had found it in a dusty drawer and held it up like a talisman. This is the heart, she'd said. And it was. We hadn't planned to open that Friday. The goal was Monday's soft launch, a trickle of familiar faces. Just enough to test systems and figure out how to breathe again. But after VetCorps tried to erase me, we'd moved heaven and earth to reclaim something more than space. We reclaimed trust. And Lexington noticed. That morning, I arrived early, still in scrubs, cradling a thermos of lukewarm tea and a heart that hadn't yet slowed since 3 a.m. My hands shook as I unlocked the front door. At 8:45, I looked out the window and froze. A line had formed. Down the sidewalk, around the corner. People wrapped in scarves, pets bundled in blankets, carriers clutched to chests. Familiar eyes met mine, hopeful, loyal, determined. They weren't here for coupons. They weren't here for convenience. They were here for us. Ethan stepped beside me, stunned. You called all these people? No, I whispered, throat tightening. Only the ones with urgent follow-ups. Valerie appeared behind the desk, her usual bun now a little crooked, but her smile steady. Lexington talks, Rachel. They just needed somewhere to listen. At 9 a.m. sharp, we opened the door. Mrs. Peterson came first, Baxter leaping through the threshold like he knew this was where he belonged. She hugged me tight, her lavender coat soft against my shoulder. He kept pawing at the door all morning, she said through tears. Like he knew you'd be here again. Then came the Garcias and their 3 rescue cats, each in a carrier hand-decorated by their kids. Mr. Johnson followed with Methuselah, his ancient tortoise. Heard you were back, he said gruffly. Figured he'd outlived Oakwood's soul. Good thing you brought it with you. By noon, we'd registered over 100 pets. But it wasn't the number that undid me. It was what they brought. Homemade cookies in holiday tins. A child's drawing of Baxter with a speech bubble. Thank you for saving my best friend. A handwritten card from Mrs. Whitaker. This town breeds better because you're in it. One boy, no older than 10, stepped forward holding a small tin box. My dog got better because of you, he said shyly. I want to help your clinic. It's my birthday money. I knelt, heart breaking in the best way, and placed the box back in his hands. Keep it. You've already given me everything I need. That afternoon, Valerie handed me a stack of printed pages. A petition, started by Mrs. Whitaker's Bridge Club, with hundreds of signatures. It had already been sent to VetCorps' main office. They called it a community response to medical exploitation, Valerie said, grinning. It may not change them, but it changed us. At closing time, Miss Etta arrived, Tinkerbell draped across her shoulder like a scarf of fur and attitude. She handed me a tin of shortbread and winked. I always said kindness doesn't go out of style. Looks like you proved it. I stood at the door that evening, watching the last car pull away under a golden sky streaked with pink. The clinic behind me buzzed with laughter and paw steps. On the wall, the first photo collage had started, thank you notes, smiling pets, scribbled love from children. Sophie passed me a wooden plaque carved by a local craftsman. She hung it above the door without a word. Care over cost. Always. I reached up and rested my hand against it, feeling the grain beneath my fingers. Rough. Real. Unbought. Unbreakable. It didn't take long for VetCorps to feel the shift. 1 week after Riverbend opened, I received a text from an old colleague still stuck inside Oakwood. They're bleeding patients. Michael's panicking. By the end of week 2, we had registered over 1,200 pets, most from Oakwood. The waiting room stayed full. Our phones rang nonstop. We extended hours, turned the break room into a makeshift office, and hired an extra tech just to manage check-ins. But the numbers weren't what mattered. What mattered were the stories. A widow who brought cookies every Friday because you sat with me when I said goodbye to Charlie. A teacher who donated blankets for crates because my students saved up to help the vet who saved my dog. A mail carrier who hung our flyer on every porch he delivered to because you once waited past closing to stitch up my boxer after a mailbox mishap. They didn't just bring pets. They brought testimony. So when Michael Trent's email arrived, subject, Lexington Market, urgent discussion, I knew it wasn't about cooperation. It was about damage control. I replied, Tuesday, 2 p.m. My office. He arrived on time. Impeccable suit. Eyes tired. Confidence cracked. Rachel, he started, settling into the guest chair across from me. You've built something fast. Efficient. I'll admit, we underestimated your impact. I didn't reply. He glanced at the framed photo of Biscuit behind me. This community clearly values you. But we're both professionals. Let's talk about collaboration. Consolidation. Shared resources. I raised a brow. You mean you want to buy me out? His smile twitched. Think of the possibilities, your name, your values, but with VetCorps' infrastructure. I leaned forward, voice calm but sharp. You had all of that. You bought a legacy and turned it into a spreadsheet. He hesitated. You can't serve a whole city alone. I smiled faintly. I'm not alone. Right then, as if scripted by the universe, the front door chimed. Miss Etta entered, carrying her usual tin of shortbread. Just dropping these off for the girls, she called out. Tinkerbell perched on her shoulder like royalty. Dr. Rachel's too thin again. Behind her came Mr. Daniels with Daisy. The Johnsons with Methuselah. A teen girl with a three-legged kitten named Clover. Michael turned, and his face went still. The glass walls behind him were covered, from floor to ceiling, taped with care and conviction. Photos of pets, cards from families, hand-drawn thank yous in every color. A mural of trust. Not curated. Lived. A sticky note in the center read, "She remembered my dog's name 3 years after he passed. This," I said softly, "is what you lost. Not a market share. Not a vet. You lost this." Michael stood, his composure slipping. You think goodwill can beat infrastructure? I looked him in the eye. I think people still know the difference between care and commerce. He paused at the door, eyes scanning the wall once more. Then he left without a word, the bell above the door chiming softly behind him. That night, I sat in my office with the lights low and the sounds of Riverbend humming just outside, Valerie's laughter, Diana giving a puppy belly rubs, Ethan humming a tune from the radio. On my desk lay a letter. Mrs. Whitaker's handwriting. Dear Dr. Rachel, Chairman is sleeping beside me, warm and purring. Thank you for protecting more than animals. You protected a way of being, kind, honest, steady. You didn't just save my cat. You saved Lexington's heart. We're with you. Always. I pressed the paper to my chest, a tear sliding down my cheek. Not from exhaustion. From fullness. At the end of the day, I stepped into the waiting room. A girl was drawing quietly at the coloring table by the wall. She looked up and asked, "Are you the real Dr. Rachel?" "I think so," I smiled. She handed me her picture. A sketch of Riverbend's front door, with hearts around it and a banner flying overhead. Where the animals feel safe. And so do we. Outside, the sky turned golden, streaked with lavender and peach. I stood under the carved sign above the door. Care over cost. Always. Michael had called me just one vet. But he never understood. We were never just one. We were a promise. And promises, when honored, don't fade. They multiply.